Hello, is that recording? Can you hear me okay, Anna? Yeah, we're running. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Linda Colley. I'm the Clinical Director for Portsmouth Place for NHS Hampshire and Isle of Wight, and I'm chairing today. There has been some limited seating made available for the public. However, the meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. So just some housekeeping. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Because of the ice rink, please assemble in the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street, past the University's Park building. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that the meeting will be live streamed. Everyone speaking via microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please, can everyone use the microphones? You can bend it towards you and remember to turn them off when you have finished speaking. We have read the reports, so presenters please only highlight any developments that have occurred since publication. Finally, I'd like to welcome Councillor Mary Vallely as the representative of the Labour group and Jim Clark as the new group manager for the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank the previous Labour group representative, Councillor Graham Heaney, and the previous Fire and Rescue group manager, Phil Foxton, for their contributions. We'll now go round the table to make introductions, starting on my left.
Kelly Nash and Strategy Unit at Portsmouth City Council.
Ron Giles, Chief Exec, Hampshire Healthcare.
Paul Edwards, Probation Service Health and Justice Team covering Portsmouth.
Roger Batterbury, Chairperson, Healthwatch Portsmouth.
Councillor Mary Vallely for Casham and Mooring.
James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services for the City Council.
Jason Oakley, University of Portsmouth Representative.
Councillor Steve Pitt, Leader of the Council.
Matthew Wellington, Cabinet for Community Wellbeing, Health and Care at the City Council, co-chair of this board and also the co-chair of the Integrated Care Partnership for Hampshire Isle of Wight.
Sarah Daly, Director of Children, Families and Education.
Lucy Rylott, Portsmouth Safeguarding Children Partnership Manager.
Lorna Reevely, Chief Officer of the Hive Portsmouth.
Bernie Allen, Partnership Director for Portsmouth, NHS Hampshire and Isle of Wight.
Diane Sherlock, Business Development, Age UK Portsmouth.
Fran White, Associate Director of Policy, Innovation and Partnerships at NHS Hampshire and Isle of Wight.
Hello, I'm Wendy Rees. I'm the Managing Director for Portsmouth and South East Hampshire for Hampshire and Isle of Wight Healthcare.
I'm Heather Mitchell. I'm the Director for Population and Health Equity for Hampshire and Isle of Wight Healthcare, trying to join the dots up across the 4 place health and wellbeing boards.
Morning colleagues, Andy Biddle, Director of Adult Social Care at the Council.
Morning, I'm Helen Atkinson, Director of Public Health.
Good morning, I'm Sue Gale. I'm the Head of Community Integration at Probation.
Anna Martin, Democratic Service.
Hannah Byrne, Public Health Principal in Public Health. Eamon Walker, Assistant Director of Public Health.
Thank you. We have no deputation requests today, but we do have some apologies for absence. So we've received apologies from Natalie Brahma-Pearl, Jim Clark, Stuart Collette, Karen Dawes and Penny Emirate. And agenda item 7 we may well need to leave until after 11 o'clock so that to allow the officers to attend for that agenda item. Yeah, Anna?
An apology coming from Councillor Lee Hunt, who was going to attend for the community safety item.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest for these particular items today? No. Oh, Councillor Pitt?
No, Linda, but while I've got everyone's attention, I have spotted the Lord Mayor with a trolley with his giant Christmas hamper on it, and he is accosting people all over the place. So just in case he turns up, I thought I'd give it some advanced context.
Thank you. Oh, if we look at the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 24th of September, was everyone happy with the minutes? Yeah. Happy to accept them as accurate then? Lovely, thank you. So we can move straight on then to agenda item number 4, Portsmouth Safeguarding Children Partnership Annual Report. Lucy.
Hello, thank you for inviting us to present the annual report. So the report highlights the significant progress in safeguarding practice across Portsmouth, with key achievements included improved early intervention strategies that have reduced escalation to our statutory services. We have enhanced multi-agency collaboration, strengthened governance structures. We have independent scrutiny now embedded and as identified areas for development, particularly in early help responses, and this has led to updated guidance and improved training. So within our partnership, our 3 statutory partnerships are represented by Sarah Daly, who took on the role of chair as required by working together the governance we work with, that one of the statutory partners takes chair. So Sarah took first dibs. We then have the ICB represented by Fiona Holder, and the police are represented by Sarah McConnell. Scott McKechnie, who was our previous independent chair, has been retained as our independent scrutineer and works across the 4 partnerships, helping to enhance that consistency across the area that we call HIPS, Hampshire, Isle of Wight, Portsmouth, Southampton. So we have a very small team that supports the partnership, and we have a budget of around £325,000 a year. Most of that is allocated to the staffing, and the rest is spent on making sure we have our website so that we can have effective communications, that we can deliver multi-agency training to make sure the lessons we've learned are being shared with our partners, and to help with our scrutiny arrangements. Sorry, my notes. We have our safeguarding strategy that we've been working towards. This was our 2nd year of a 3-year strategy, which has 8 priorities in it, which are highlighted in the report itself. But of particular note this year, as I've said, we've had better early identification and responses, particularly focused in our work in the family hubs that's improved the response to families during that first critical 1,001 days. We have better response to neglect now that we have practitioners using what's called the Day in the Life tool, so they can look at the impact of cumulative neglect upon a child and see the impact of parenting upon their daily lived experience. We now have a sexual abuse and exploitation delivery group that has been set up in Portsmouth, that's led by the Head of Service for Quality and Safeguarding from Children's Services, and that's really helping coalesce our work around that area, which we know in the next iteration of working together the government will publish next year. It's going to be a key area of focus, so the fact that we'll be 2 years into that will give us a really good head start on what we're doing. And also around our inclusive safeguarding measures, we're really thinking about how we support children from global ethnic majority communities. We heard from them in the Voice of the Child work we did this year, that they're still experiencing, and to almost a greater extent, that kind of hidden racism that they're facing, and parents are saying they're experiencing that as well. It's not overt, it's covert, and very difficult for them to challenge, but is a feeling that they're left with. That then means, in terms of safeguarding, that they're less likely to find trusted adults and be willing to share safeguarding disclosures. So we have agreed as a partnership that January to December 26, that will be a key area of focus, how we improve cultural competence. We've done a lot of work around audits, reviews and continuous development. There'll be people around this table who've come across my safeguarding checklist or the compact audits. We have a great response to those, and what that does is it takes the various statutory duties from statutory organisations, schools and education, health and our voluntary and community sector, and uses 12 standard indicators to ensure that we have a coherent safeguarding approach so that we can measure the arrangements across the city. And what we're seeing is a greater engagement in that. It's a self-assessment, so we encourage agencies and organisations to be really honest. If you say something requires improvement or is inadequate, that's not a weakness. We see that as a strength because it gives us the opportunity to work with you and to help you. We're seeing much greater engagement with that. We only published one child safeguarding practice review this year. It was very delayed because sometimes the family court proceedings as well as the legal proceedings need to finish first before we can publish. But it was around a child where there was non-accidental injury and the parents have been charged with that injury, and we focused our attention this year around mental health crises. We were seeing an increased number of children, probably since COVID and lockdown, coming through where there was a requested safeguarding response because parents were unable to safely manage the child's mental health crises. So we did a bit of work to try and understand what do we all mean by mental health crises and what is the response? When is it a health response? When is it a safeguarding response? And actually it's a whole system response that is required. So we're now working to embed the recommendations from that into practice. We did some great work with the Council of Portsmouth Schools and with Urbond, which is a voluntary and community sector organisation that primarily supports children from global ethnic majority communities. But both of them were really great in working with us this year and will continue into next year to support us with understanding what it's like to be a child living in Portsmouth and how we respond to their safeguarding needs. So we've had over 4,000 practitioners trained through the PSCP, which is a phenomenal amount, meaning they're getting consistent messages, not only about what safeguarding is, but what our approach is in Portsmouth. And they know exactly where to go to get the help that that child needs, which you can't get from a national training organisation or when you do it virtually. We have a reduced referral rate. So early help initiatives are really showing that it's reduced from 24 to 17%, which was phenomenal. And strategic panels have indicated we have more coherent response to serious youth violence and safeguarding around habitual knife carriers. And we actually saw in the police data that you can see in there that there was a lower incidence of that in that year. And we are working on our trauma-informed practices, realising that some of the behaviours we see are a child's response to their lived experience and their home environment, and we need to try and meet them from that place, even though what we're being presented with can be challenging. So any further information you can find on the portsmouthscp.org.uk website. You are very welcome to make contact with the PSCP at any time. Our email address is pscp@portsmouthcc.gov.uk, and there are lots of resources and additional practitioner tools on our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much. An excellent, well-written report. What I particularly liked actually was when you did the young children and people's views and the work you did with the Urbonds. And actually they've got some really sensible ideas, haven't they, about how to fix up the problem. So yeah, really great piece of work. Thank you. So opening up to any comments or questions. Yeah, Roger.
Thank you. Fascinating, as always. I just wanted to do a plug, really, that Healthwatch Portsmouth have literally just published a report, Mental Health Experiences of Children and Young People in Portsmouth, where we had feedback from 1,534 young people and 125 parents and carers. So we've made some recommendations. It's published. It's on the Healthwatch Portsmouth website. So bit of a plug, but also it would supplement some of the matters that you raised. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, yeah, Heather.
I picked up in the report about the increasing numbers of children who care experienced, been exploited, turning 18 and, you know, carrying the weight to that past experience, trauma and vulnerability. How do you feel you're progressing the work to improve that situation for those vulnerable young people?
It is a real challenge because we know that they can feel like there's a cliff edge at 18 as they move into adult services if they don't have a care need. We do have a transitional safeguarding group that has been meeting, and that's been ongoing for about a year now, and that's joins up our adolescent service with our adult services and looks at how we can use the MARM, the multi-agency risk management, to coalesce around that person. Obviously, when they turn 18, it is very much down to them wanting the support and agreeing it, but that offer is there and we're trying to strengthen it. I think it's also interesting that going into the working together that's going to be published next year, safeguarding of our care experience children is going to be an area they focus on. So obviously the partnership will respond to that, but it is something that we keep an eye on, and we get regular updates from our head of adolescent service into the partnership who can raise any concerns about that.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, and I think just to add, we hold a survey every February, and the feedback we get from our care experience, which is a phenomenally high response, is that actually the majority of them feel safe and they have safe, secure relationships. And I think that enables us to better understand the trauma in the previous experience because they are more willing to be open and talk about it. So that growing awareness we see as a positive thing, that we know and understand it. And I think the strength in the relationships between adults and children in Portsmouth is always growing. We're always curious about what more we can do. And I know that there have been conversations between Sam, my deputy, and Andy's deputy, Joe, about the 18-year-olds who actually aren't care experienced, who will no longer be open to children's services, but might not necessarily meet the threshold for adults, but still fall into that vulnerable exploitation group, and how we might better understand them and identify them and find ways of working with them as well. So it's something we're very conscious of, and very conscious that there are still a number of vulnerable adults in the city, and it feeds into the complex adults work that we're doing as well. So it's an area of ongoing focus for us.
Thank you. So we've been asked to accept that update. Lovely. Thank you. So now we're going on to an updated paper from the local government reorganisation. It's the statutory consultation. I believe it's Natalie's paper that Andy is going to lead us through. Thank you.
I'll refrain from commenting on how many people might be interested in LGR and the passions that it invokes at different levels for different people in our community. However, local government reorganisation is coming, we believe. So the government has now launched their statutory consultation on options. So what Natalie wanted to do was to bring an update to the board around what that means and people's involvement in that. So I'll pull out a few key points from the paper, if that's okay. So very briefly, the background. Government published a devolution white paper last December, in fact a year ago today, I think. It doesn't seem possible. To abolish two-tier local government arrangements where services are managed in different places and put in place single-tier unitary councils with populations of around 500,000 people. Portsmouth has been a unitary authority for 28 years, give or take. 1997 is when it came into being as a unitary. Obviously, it's been a council for a lot longer than that. And we have around about 214,300 residents. I'm glad Matt Gummerson's not here. He might pick me up on those numbers, but it's roughly that. And we were included as an organisation in the statutory reorganisation process along with all of Hampshire and Isle of Wight councils, district boroughs and upper tier councils. As an administration, Portsmouth City Council didn't feel that local government reorganisation should apply to Portsmouth and has set out reasoning on a number of occasions to the Secretary of State around that basis. But the government's response has been consistent that the council will be part of local government reorganisation. So the paper sets out some further information on the 6 criteria that government will apply to all of the options that have been put forward by various councils around what the new unitary structure for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight will look like. So all 15 councils in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, supported at the time by KPMG, assessed 8 options for reorganising into between 2 and 5 unitary councils. The preferred model, supported by 12 after Hampshire County and East Hampshire District Council withdrew from the process, is for 5 unitary authorities. That's 4 on the mainland and the Isle of Wight remaining independent. The new proposed mainland unitary councils are centred around the 4 major urban economies and population centres of Southampton, Portsmouth, Winchester and Basingstoke. And for the existing Portsmouth City Council, this means in nearly all of the options, joining with the current Fareham, Gosport and Havant Borough Councils to form a new Portsmouth and South East Hampshire Authority. Should emphasise that's not necessarily the name of the putative new authority. I'm sure that will take a very long time to decide with lots of opinion. However, it sort of sums up where we are at the moment. So the key points of the proposal that's been submitted is that the new authority would have a population of either about 554,000 or about 582,000, depending whether there were some boundary changes amongst those current 4 areas. We believe the proposal is designed to meet the government criteria, which are efficiency, financial resilience, high quality services, community engagement and support for devolution. Option 1A is Portsmouth's preferred option, and it includes some boundary changes, as I referred to earlier on, that we believe would better reflect local communities and, importantly, health system footprints. And the proposal was informed by quite extensive consultation and collaboration with 61% of our respondents, of our residents who responded to a survey supporting that option if reorganisation was unavoidable. So the City Council's position is that we've got a strong preference to remain outside of the reorganisation, as we believe we're already a stable and effective unitary authority, of which 82% of our residents agree who responded. However, if reorganisation proceeds, option 1A is considered the better fit for our communities, offering the best alignment with local health and care systems, economic growth and balanced council tax bases. And we believe that 1A offers a close alignment with our acute hospital footprint, quite strong alignment with our primary health networks and neighbourhood health focus, supports us with prevention and helping to address health inequalities, and there's areas of common need in Havant, Gosport and Portsmouth in particular coming together. We think there'd be increased uniformity across the area of social care systems supporting health pathways, hospital discharge pathways, and hospital discharge pathways aren't the only ones we talk about when it comes to healthcare. The growing resonance for neighbourhood health. We're already working together as a community, and we believe that focusing with Havant, Gosport and Fareham, we could share that work, and we could work further and get greater achievements for our residents in terms of community health. We also think that the model we're working to at the moment and the potential option 1A would support a strengthened voluntary and community and social enterprise join up in our health and care system. The Council opposes any model with fewer than 4 mainland unitary authorities or any model that were to merge Portsmouth with the Isle of Wight or Southampton. And the detail around those concerns is set out on 3.15 in the paper. As I said earlier, 61% of our residents who responded to the survey supported that option for Portsmouth South East Hampshire. So the next steps are the government statutory consultation is open until the 11th of January. Statutory partners are encouraged to respond, and we believe their input will carry significant weight. I think it's probably fair to say in some other parts of the country that have gone slightly further ahead, what we've seen is an attention to what statutory consultees, what their opinion is. That's a whole range of bodies, our NHS partners of course, but then people working in probation and any other statutory bodies are included in that. Regardless of the outcome, I have to say this, Portsmouth will continue to have a council delivering essential services, though the structure and the name may change. Hopefully the paper gives you all you wanted to know but were afraid to ask about local government reorganisation, and if you are a statutory consultee, hopefully it gives you some information that will be useful to you in responding to that statutory consultation. Thank you very much for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Andy or comments? Councillor Pitt?
Oh, where do we start? Andy's given you the politically correct and officer neutral response to all of this. Mine is this takes us to hell in a handcart. Picking up on a few things Andy said, though, it is absolutely essential that all of the statutory consultees do respond, and that they do respond supporting option 1A. The political fight around all of this and whether Portsmouth should be involved in it or not is not part of your considerations as statutory consultees. You have to feed back on what is in front of you, and the option that's being consulted on is option 1A. That is what we want. The other options we're not interested in. The idea that we would end up with Hampshire being divided up, with East Hampshire and Winchester joining in with Basingstoke and Deane, Hart and Rushmore into one giant unitary council would be really poor in terms of relationships and partnerships going forward, and it would not, in our view, meet the criteria that the government have laid out. Having said that, we don't really think that the criteria that the government have laid out are the correct criteria anyway. With the government have produced absolutely zero evidence, and I mean zero evidence, to say why any of this is a good idea. So this is a really difficult time. In terms of the particular interests of this board, though, we have to make sure that we are making a very strong case that the relationships that we have in this part of the county, centred around Portsmouth as a unitary council, are protected as we move forward. The county's view is that because they deliver social care services as an upper tier local authority to Fareham, Gosport and haven't, that we should forget about everything we do here in Portsmouth, and that their model and working practices and everything else is what we should be building out from for the new unitary council. I have been absolutely 100% clear that Portsmouth will not, under any circumstances, tolerate that. It would not be in the best interests of the new residents coming in from Fareham, Gosport and haven't either. So I could talk about this all flipping day, unfortunately, because it's been literally my life for months. I'm not going to do that, but there are really important bits for all of you as partners here to understand that there is an existential threat to the models that we've developed, which have made us sustainable. If we were to abandon all of that and roll in and just adopt what Hampshire do, because that's Hampshire's preference. I've been very, very clear in stressing the importance of that when I meet with the other leaders, to the extent that they are probably quite cross with me for saying those things, but I believe it passionately. We all know what happened when the CCG went, after fighting to keep it for as long as we did. The very idea that we're just going to give up everything else we've got left and roll that into some Hampshire vision of the world, so that they can kindly hand it back to us to operate a new council, is utter madness. So in your responses, please reflect on the strengths that we have, the partnerships that we all value, and why those strengths and partnerships are in the best interests of the residents that we serve. That is the message we want to get across, and we believe that option 1A, because we've got no choice, is the preferred option under that model. However, I would just point out one thing. When we put the submission in on 26th of September, we said to the government, we want you to respond to tell us why we are required to be part of local government reorganisation. What are the reasons why Portsmouth should be part of this process? And repeated our request to be left out of the process. And we're very, very clear that only if they rejected our request to be excluded from LGR would we support option 1A. In the consultation, you will see that it says that Portsmouth supports option 1A. This is misrepresentation, because they've not acknowledged that they've ignored that letter. We've had no response since the 26th September to justify why we need to be part of the process at all. And you might think, well, everyone's doing it. Well, no, they're not. This is affecting 164 district and borough councils, 9 unitaries and 21 county councils. It's not affecting everyone. The minister that started all of this, Jim McMahon, the former leader of Oldham Council, Oldham is not part of this. Windsor and Maidenhead, tiny little council, unitary, isn't part of this. None of the London boroughs are part of this, and many of them are smaller than Portsmouth. So we've seen no evidence presented as to why particularly it should affect us, and that's a huge concern. So hopefully that information is useful. It's all checkable, by the way. So I've tried very hard in what I've said to be not party political in any way. These are views that I have expressed repeatedly in full council meetings and in all the letters to ministers. We just wanted clarity and an explanation as to why we should place our residents, I believe, at further risk.
Thank you. And can I just be clear on the paper then? So the 12 that stayed in the joint consultation, they're all putting on a very similar model to what we're proposing 1A. But Hampshire County Council, East Hampshire Council and Gosport, are they doing something different?
My understanding, at the moment of speaking is that Gosport didn't wish to be part of this in any way, shape or form, and so haven't been.
They didn't respond to the statutory consultation. It was a decision on their part. Their situation is different to ours, though. They're a borough, so they literally have no choice. They couldn't argue that if Hampshire County Council disappears that they become a unitary authority. That was not a viable argument. So because they are only being done to and have no say in the process at all, they decided that because they didn't want it, the only option available to them was to just not respond and stay out of it. Whereas as a unitary council, we were making a different argument, which is that we shouldn't be in the process in the first place. However, Gosport are back in the room having conversations now that the government has said which options it will consult on. So whilst they didn't sign up to that option, they are now participating as we move forward because they need to.
That's great. Thank you very much. So, Councillor Winnington.
Thank you. And just for some further context, and this is just to again reiterate the importance of our working practices. As we know within the Hampshire Isle of Wight, that what we do in Portsmouth is seen as being and when we talk about our health and social care system, is seen as being a very good model of what to do, and indeed is a paragon of things that we're going to be hearing about neighbourhood healthcare, for example, shortly. And so therefore those kind of things are really important, that we use that as a reason to back the least bad option if we have to go ahead with it anyway, because that's effectively what it is. Because some of you, if you were really bored, might have watched the full council meeting yesterday where we went over a lot of these things in a more in-depth way. But it is something that we need to make sure we put forward. Something that is worth knowing. It's not in this report, but all MPs in Hampshire Isle of Wight, apart from one, which is the MP for here, only because he's a member of the government, so therefore cannot do it. So he's now a whip. He was a minister. And so it cannot do these kind of things. But every single MP of all parties backed option 1A. So, and that includes areas where so for example, where the local council has not backed 1A, but the MPs have. So all the Conservative MPs, all the Labour MPs, all the Lib Dem MPs in Hampshire Isle of Wight, other than Stephen Morgan, but we know that because he can't, but Amanda Martin did as well, as one of the Labour MPs, did back 1A. So I think it's something else as well. It has significant amounts of support, and as Steve was alluding to, that option out of all of them, for various reasons. I mean, there's lots of things around housing land and about tax base and all that kind of stuff. But it's also, if you look at a map, it's also reasonable, isn't it? Because if 1A, it would include Horndean, Clanfield, Rollins Castle and Newlands, that little bit of Winchester that is literally next to Waterlooville town centre. And so just in terms of community ability to do things in communities, makes it a huge amount easier if those areas are brought in rather than they stay as part of a unitary, which if you look at the map on there, so they would become part of a sprawling unitary which would go from East Hampshire right over to at least Test Valley, and possibly even down to New Forest. So it's all about effectively thinking about our community in Portsmouth, but also we all know about the family connections that we have in areas and the way we work together. So it really is really important that we get those responses, because they are going to take that into account. And of course, from a practical level, so for the NHS, for example, the way that the footprint works, both for the Hampshire Isle of Wight healthcare and also our acute hospital trust, the more we can take in of the catchment going up East Hants, that actually works better in terms of the community, the way that things are organised on that basis. Whereas as if, again, Clanfield, Horndean, Robins Castle and Newlands are cut off from the South East Hampshire area, then that actually makes it a bit more difficult, the working, and you've got sort of effectively areas that are isolated from your, in Newlands' case, going way over into Winchester, but also in the case of in the Clanfield, Horndean area, that going up to Petersfield. So there's practical reasons. There's lots of other reasons which, say, if you really want to go into it, there's loads of reports out there that we put forward. But it is really important that we show that sort of, we are here for Portsmouth. The ideal would be we wouldn't be part of this at all. But if we are, it's about all those, we put this forward for a reason. It's not just because we think, oh, we'll just shove this in and it's something we just like to do. It is there for a reason as the least worst option. And so please do respond and encourage other organisations based in Portsmouth to also respond as well. Because that's really, so who are not in this room, but it can be anyone as well. So it's statutory services, but it's also any other organisations as well. So in our charity sector, in our business sector as well, get them to respond as well. And of course you can respond as individuals, and that's really important. So you can give your voice as whether you live in Portsmouth, or you're just working in Portsmouth, or you're living or based outside the city. It really is important as well you put that view across.
Thank you very much. And the deadline is 11th of January 2026, so if we make sure it's done by then. Lovely. Thank you very much. We will now move on to our Public Health Annual Report. I believe Helen's just going to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. So, as you'll all be aware, it's a statutory responsibility for public health and local government to produce an annual public health report every year, and we always try to focus it on one of the priorities of the Health and Wellbeing Board strategy, which we like to term the strategy that is the causes of the causes. And this year's report has been led by Emma Walker with support from Hannah, and they are going to present some of the case studies. But I just wanted to say the theme for this year, as you will have seen, is school attendance. And really we have been focusing on how school attendances affects two of the areas of our strategy, two of the priorities. So in terms of positive relationships, but obviously also on school attainment, because we know that attendance, which was an issue prior to COVID but has worsened during COVID, and we've all seen the rise in young people's anxiety levels, which is clearly a contributor to a school attendance. So just wanted to say that we're going to, it's looking a lot better now in terms of should be able to see the films. We're going to show some short films, but Emma's just going to give us a flavour of the report, and then Sarah's going to say a few words as well.
Thanks, Helen. I'm not going to say too much because you'll have had the slides. So what you got in your pack is essentially the annual report that's going to go to the design team, or is with the design team now, ready to be published shortly. And as Helen said, so what we've tried to do is really look at the multiple factors that impact on whether a child attends school. And hopefully what you can see from the slides is that it's multifactorial, highly complex, and grounded in all of the things that we know impact. And it starts from very early in a child's life. And we know that if a child isn't ready for school, even from that point, there's a higher likelihood that a child will be absent from school. So it starts really early, and a lack of attendance at school leads to then poorer outcomes throughout the life course of a child, into adulthood and beyond. So that school attendance is vital, and not just in terms of academic achievement, but you'll see in a minute when we show this short clip, which is some young people from Unlock that we had some conversations with about attendance, that they know that being in school is more than just about academic attainment. It's about that social aspect. They get a lot from it, and they know they want to be in school. But for some of them, as Helen mentioned, they feel a lack of safety at times. And what we've found through a lot of the work is, and we know that our children's colleagues have already embedded relational practice in the way that they work, and a number of our schools are already doing some fantastic stuff in terms of relational practice. And the evidence base, although it's somewhat mixed around a number of specific interventions, what runs through it is that it's the relationships that are important, and the fundamental element around that is what seems to be vital. So I'm not going to say too much more because it's kind of in your slides, but I just wanted to show this short clip, as I said, of the young people. The main report will go on the education section of the JSNA. There will be the longer version of the young people's video, and there'll also be in the full report there's videos of some clips we did with interviews we did with teachers at Milton Cross, and also parents of the parent board. So you'll be able to see those as well, and there'll be other resources and the full literature review as well, and connecting up with the other work that's going on around Portsmouth too. So I will, hopefully this will work. So yeah, just wanted to share that, and I know Sarah's going to say a few words too.
Thank you, and we really welcome this report. It sits really well alongside the work and the strategies that we currently have running within education and schools in the city. And I think it's important, you know, this is a really, really strong group of children here talking incredibly eloquently about their experiences in schools. And I am really conscious that there are many other voices and many other children with very different experiences. And I think that's sometimes the complexity of attendance, is there is no one single panacea for this. There are a number of different strategies and a number of different approaches. And we have a lot of different approaches and responses in the city. And we've heard about the impact of relational practice. That's been a really important leadership piece with our head teachers, and as we've heard, the majority of schools in the city are currently engaging with that programme, which is kind of an integrated programme with colleagues within the City Council, and enables that kind of culture within schools to grow. We have had a lot of liaison with the DFE, and I think to provide reassurance around their kind of review of the practice in Portsmouth and the work that we're currently doing. They feel it's really strong and they feel that our practice is great. However, we still see that challenge. Where we have seen the narrowing of the gap, specifically within primary schools, we are back to a better level now, post-COVID. It's still not where we would want it to be, but very much in line with national. The challenge for us comes with that transfer from primary into secondary. Our primary schools are small, they are more flexible and more able to respond to individual children's needs. We know when children transfer, they feel lost, schools are overwhelming, and many of our children struggle to interact with the curriculum. So we welcome the reforms, we welcome the changes that are being made. We hope they go far enough. But I think against the backdrop of significant cuts and a shortfall of kind of budget within this world, we no longer have EWOs knocking on families' doors. We do have some schools in the cities that are now knocking on doors, but that's teacher time out and about. But they are seeing some value there. But I think it's also important to note that the pastoral care within schools has also shrunk significantly. In fact, to the extent where some schools simply don't have that anymore. So to hear children saying it would be great if, absolutely. And we need to consider how better we reach into that space in terms of that early help and that early response, and think about the allocation of resources that we have in the city that are able to lean into that. We have work around Couth, and we have work around My Happy Mind, which is certainly impacting significantly on a number of children in terms of their well-being. But we need to ensure, as I've had a very quick flick through the Health Watch report, we need to ensure that everyone's aware of those resources and how to access them, because there's a real drive, isn't there, to push people up a ladder of, I need to see CAMS and I need to see this person. Actually, there are a lot of resources available, so we just need to highlight that clearly. But yeah, this work will really sit alongside the work done by the Portsmouth Education Plan, but also with the safeguarding, because if we don't have children in schools, we are clearly concerned about what they're doing. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Roger.
You beat me to it, Sarah. I was just going to say some of the interviews with the children, and very brave that they were doing that. I couldn't imagine doing that back in the day when I was at school, a long time ago, admittedly. But the Health Watch report, the mental health experiences of children and young people, you're right, there's a number of factors that we've pulled out in our report that would resonate in there. So thanks for the plug. But, you know, we've made findings, we've made recommendations, you know. I'm trying not to steal the thunder of everyone else's reports, but it's just timely. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions, Hannah?
Thank you, both those points. And as we've referred to the My World Triangle, looking after the emotional mental health of the parents and their situation is also important for our city because they're often as we've seen through the Portsmouth Parent Board consultation with families, they're often the ones, alongside the teachers, noticing those little signs, and actually how do we continue to support those great relationships that we do see across education with families, and how we strengthen that for all our children, including some of our children that are masking until their emotional mental health gets a lot worse later down the line.
So we're being asked to note that. Oh, Councillor, did you want to go?
Thanks. I'd just like to just briefly touch on obviously as public health comes under my portfolio, but it is very much in this year a cross portfolio with children's as well. This is coming to the so it came to my decision meeting on Monday. It's coming to the children's decision meeting. It's been okay. So
well, it's been to the lead member briefing.
Yes. So yeah. So it's imminent as well. And of course it comes here. But it is a really key thing. I just always like to give a bit of an anecdote, because I was a school governor for 5 years from 2009 to 2014, and the school I was governor of, which covers quite a bit of my ward, was one of those places where the school is right at the very edge of its catchment area. Literally across the road is not the catchment area, and then the catchment in that case goes all the way down to the Hayden Ferry. And when I joined, they had a persistent issue with absence, and the work, and actually goes to what Sarah was just saying about having to go and be extremely proactive and literally go and knock on doors, which of course you don't have the resources from within because with the local authority level to do that, so it is down to the schools to do it, and it absolutely made a difference. And I think you cannot underestimate the work and the best practice that goes on with the Portsmouth Education Partnership, with the work that goes on with partnership working across our schools more generally in terms of good practice. And I think the reason why we are where we are, not to where we want to be, but where we are and what's reflected in here, is about that good practice. Not just in terms of going out and getting children when you need to, but it's about all that kind of holistic approach and making sure we're working across organisations, across different parts of the council as well, and way out in our community, and so making use of the resources like Health Watch have identified, etc. So I think it's very if you're coming from this from outside, it can seem, why are you doing a public health annual report about something so narrow? But it isn't narrow, because it reflects so much that's going on. And again, thank you for everyone involved. And I think this report really reflects, it's not a narrow area, it's just, this is just something that is often a way of, it's like a consequence of lots of other factors that if we can work together to tackle those factors, then the outcome is going to be children are actually turning up at school, and children turn up at school, they have amazingly better life chances as well.
Thank you very much. Lovely. So I think we're going to have to hold still item number 7. I can't see. Yeah. So we'll move on to community safety update. Caroline.
Oh, it's wonderful to see such a full house, isn't it? Anyway, thank you for having us here today. This is a noting paper to provide an update from the Community Safety Subgroup of the Health and Wellbeing Board. I'm presenting this paper on behalf of Superintendent Paul Markham, who chairs the group. In a moment, I'm going to pass you over to Sam Graves, who leads on our strategic community safety assessment. She's going to provide you some information around the updated refresh, and also specifically around what we were discussing here last time in September, which is a new section around cybercrime, so we can reflect on what are the implications of that knowledge and what do we need to do moving forward. And then afterwards, I'll talk to you a bit more about some emerging work that we're about to pick up on around being a safe and connected community. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much. So every year we have to do a strategic assessment. It's a statutory responsibility for us. This year was an update rather than a full one, although there was a really detailed chapter on online crime. As we've sent out the full strategic assessment, I'm really going to do a very, very brief key points from that, and then talk a little bit more about online crime. Is it? Well, would. My slides are not working. Okay. Bit weird. Yeah, I'll just, Hannah can do that in the background and I'll just keep going. So, the main thing was that police recorded crime has reduced by 2% from last year. But actually, as we know, there are lots of limitations of using police recorded crime to look at trend data. So as part of our strategic assessment, we look at a lot of different data sources so that we can get a picture overall. When we looked at all the different data sets, particularly our local community safety data set, but also hospital admissions for violence, etc., it suggests that actually it's been a very stable picture of crime over the last decade, and for violence as well. Since last year, if we look at just police data, most types of crime have remained stable, and violence, domestic violence and violence against women and girls have also remained stable. There are some crimes that have increased slightly, but that's in more detail in the strategic assessment, and they are relatively small increases numerically. Moving on to antisocial behaviour, there's been a substantial and sustained reduction in antisocial behaviour reported to the police over the last decade, but there's been a really mixed picture of ASB reported to the different services. So we've seen increases in ASB reported to the Housing Antisocial Behaviour Unit since 2022. That could be linked to some training. Oh, sorry. I'm really sorry. I can't move that closer to me. So antisocial behaviour reported to the Housing Behaviour Unit could be due to housing officers receiving more training, so being more likely to record them. There's been overall slight increases to the noise pollution team, but there have been recent reductions in reports to the Clean, Safe and Tidy team and in arson reports to the Fire and Rescue Service. Our most recent community safety survey in 2024 has found a very stable trend in ASB, so we think that the reporting could be due to people reporting it differently to different services or deciding not to report. We will be running the survey again next year. The fieldwork will take place in February and March, with the report sort of due at the end of May, sort of June time, so we can pick up again and see whether this trend is continuing. So the focus today is to talk about cybercrime. Cybercrime is any criminal activity that involves or is facilitated by digital technology, particularly computers, networks or the internet. So many traditional crime types can be cyber-enabled or facilitated, but basically some crime types are particularly affected, including fraud, theft, extortion, exploitation, harassment and abuse. It's really difficult for us to get a picture of the extent to which our residents are affected, because it's thought to be really underreported. There are some significant barriers about finding out. Many people feel shame or embarrassment about being the victims, or think nothing can be done. And there's also a lot of confusion about whether something is actually a crime at all, and if so, who would they report that to? Cybercrime crosses geographical boundaries as well, so sometimes the perpetrators are not even in this country, and that makes detection and prevention and prosecution a lot more complex than traditional forms of crime. The most recent crime survey for England and Wales actually found that approximately half of crime now is either fraud or computer misuse offences. We've looked at local police data, and we know a lot of cybercrime is not reported to the police, and we found that out through our local survey. 8% of crime reported to our police were flagged as cybercrime. That is a 35% increase from last year. It may reflect a genuine increase, but we do have to be mindful that it could be better awareness as well, so we do need to take that into account. Our community safety survey in 2024 found that the most common crime experienced by our residents is actually online fraud. So that's something we need to take into account. There's also pretty high ranking where personal hacking and phishing where money or data was stolen as well. There are lots of enabling factors and emerging risks, detailed a lot more in the chapter. I wanted to focus today really on artificial intelligence. AI is developing at a rapid pace at the moment, and it can be found throughout society in a growing range of applications. There's lots of implications for security, privacy, intellectual property and disinformation. It can be used to identify vulnerabilities and automate wide-ranging attacks. It can be used to produce really realistic texts or responses to victims very quickly, which can manipulate victims into providing access to systems or information for online fraud. Really concerningly, AI can be used to generate realistic images and videos known as deepfakes. The use of deepfake content in the UK has increased dramatically, from approximately 500,000 in 2023 to an estimated 8 million deepfakes estimated to be shared by the end of this year. The main concern around the use of deepfakes is adding to online child sexual abuse material, but also increasing distrust in information, manipulating public opinion and supporting narratives of extremist groups. Serious and organised crime can also be cyber-enabled, where it's amplified or enabled more through digital technology. All categories of cybercrime can be, but this is actually particularly fraud, extortion and trade in drugs or weapons, although most of it is actually drug-related activity. Most of the serious and organised crime that's cyber-enabled has an international element, and with networks becoming more dispersed, resilient and able to adapt. An emerging concerning trend, and this was also mentioned by Charlie Periclaus from Prevent, are comm networks, which are loose online groups which often involve teenage boys and young men collaborating to commit harmful acts both online and offline, with some key issues being sharing violent and sexual content which can normalise harm, but also coercing victims, who are often children, into self-harm or abuse and then sharing evidence which harm them further. Quite a lot of cybercrime is financially motivated. Nationally, fraud, online fraud has increased by 34%. There were 4.2 million offences last year. Again, online fraud was the most common crime reported to our local survey. 7.6% of our respondents were victims of online crime. Ransomware attacks have been called by the National Crimes Agency the biggest cyber crime threat, because they consider that it threatens national security and could cause major financial and data losses. At the moment, the education sector has been hit the hardest, with 91% of universities and 85% of colleges reporting cyber attacks, many which are ransomware. But we do know that local authorities, voluntary sector and many other organisations have also reported attacks, which could prevent our residents accessing our services. Our local police data has shown that stalking and harassment are the most frequently reported forms of cybercrime, making up 63% of reported cybercrime in Portsmouth. And that's because a lot of the more financial stuff is reported to Action Fraud or directly to banks rather than the police. But there's been a 13% increase compared to last year. There's also been increases nationally. This is thought to be because there's improved and more easily accessible tracking technologies available to people who are trying to do that. Intimate image abuse is a non-consensual creation and sharing of sexual images and videos for a variety of motives, but which include harassment, control and extortion. There's a national revenge porn helpline that provides support and also helps remove images, and they saw a 21% rise compared to the previous year. There's also sexually coerced extortion, where offenders trick victims into sharing intimate content and then demand money or more material in order to sort of blackmail a person. And there have been increases in that nationally, particularly for victims who are children. and sort of under 18s. But really, the main message is anyone who's active online can be a victim of fraud or computer misuse or any other type of cyber crime. But the victim and offender profiles do depend on the type of crime that is being committed. So women are overwhelmingly the victims of intimate image abuse and sexual harassment, mostly by people they knew, and in almost 60% of cases by partners or ex-partners. Women, the LGBTQ plus community and young people are disproportionately the victims of stalking, while teenage boys and young men are overwhelmingly the victims of sexually coerced extortion, and that's mostly by criminal gangs rather than people that they know. And so through the chapter we've identified there's a particular risk for children and young people here, but also for vulnerable or isolated people who are seeking connection with others. Part of the process of doing the strategic assessment is to review the priorities for the Community Safety Partnership and review the priorities recommended the year before. What we found does support continuing with the current priorities, but we also would ask partners to consider how digital technologies are impacting the current priorities, but there is also their risk to their service users and to Portsmouth residents generally. The increasing use of digital platforms to enable crime, exploitation and the sharing of harmful content highlights the need for coordinated prevention, education and enforcement strategies. We're currently doing a scoping bit of work for the community safety subgroup of this meeting, which is to look at what work is currently being done by partners to mitigate some of these risks. Are there any questions before I pass back to Caroline? Or
Thank you, Sam. It's very sobering, and I'm sure once people have had a chance to reflect, there might be some thoughts on it. But as Sam says, just to reassure you, the starting point for us is a bit of a gap analysis, because I'm sure individual organisations are absolutely doing stuff, particularly around cyber security. It's about how we can coordinate our efforts together through our current work plan. Returning to the thought around the emerging work, so you can see from the report, and I'll touch on that in a moment, that we're continuing to work on those other priority areas. But a piece of emerging work has been around how do we support feelings of safety and connection across our community. And this actually follows on from a discussion that we had here in September around a growing concern around online harm, which we're addressing through the cyber crime assessment, but also around disinformation and around online activity spilling out into real life violence. What we've done within the subgroup is we're now going to set up a task and finish group to develop some citywide messaging around being safe and connected, some practical toolkits, leaning into some other areas such as Liverpool, such as Greater Manchester, that have done some really good work around this, and actually facing this head on. We want to move from being that reactive enforcement, which we know we probably still need to continue to a degree, but we want to move into a proactive space around that. So that's a piece of work we're pulling together at the moment. As part of that, we'll explore the creation of sort of misinformation hub as part of the current community safety platforms that we've just reviewed, and also be thinking about how we can draw connection to the Portsmouth 100 celebrations. And you know, this is Portsmouth, we're proud of Portsmouth, there's a lot that's really good about Portsmouth, so let's celebrate it and let's use that as a catalyst to start creating dialogue again, because part of this division is about a lack of dialogue. So it's how can we have safe, connected discussions, particularly people we wouldn't necessarily always want to. Yeah, it's easy to talk to people we like and share our own views, isn't it? But how can we be talking together and starting to sort of break through some of those divisions that are being created? So the key goal in this is to strengthen cohesion and reduce those reactive costs. Many of you would have seen that there was a news headline a month or so ago that just policing protests in Hampshire has cost about 200,000 this year. That's across Hampshire, but we've seen our share of them locally. Obviously, that is very much a physical space thing, but we know that there's a lot of rhetoric going on in that online space. But ultimately, what this comes back down to is being a connected community and being able to have those trusted conversations. It pulls back to some of the earlier pieces again about in a world where we can't always trust what's online, we need to know that we can trust really good connected relationships, don't we? Within our schools, within our community, to have those safe conversations and to test stuff out. So that work is just starting out, and hopefully in the new year we'll be able to bring something a bit more back for you, just in terms of the other work streams. In terms of serious violence, we've established the Younger Futures panel that's been led by Children's Services. This is a pilot, and we're still uncertain about the future of the pilot from March. We're waiting for some indication from the Home Office and the VRU in turn, but we are seeing this as a real opportunity. We welcome it, and we see that opportunity it presents for us to think about how we support children at an earlier point, because this is about getting children slightly earlier downstream than the ones we already know and work with. In terms of our violence against women and girls priority work, it'd be remiss of me to say that today is the last day of 16 days of action for the White Ribbon campaign, and to thank all of the organisations around the table for all of their support across the last 16 days and before that and beyond, because we'll continue to work together around this agenda. I think each year we've bettered it, and I think we definitely had the biggest flag raising yet. So that's been a really key focus in the last month. And just to let you know, in terms of our forward work plan, that in terms of antisocial behaviour, we've got a case review currently underway in terms of how we manage cases of antisocial behaviour coming through, and that Lauren Rackham will be back to present that one at the next meeting, I think in March. So that's the update from Community Safety.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Yeah, Councillor.
Really good and interesting report. I'm just wondering where we are with racism, because we're kind of experiencing quite a lot of it in Costume and Wimmering at the minute.
Sorry, yeah, and I should have been a bit more explicit. The reason we need a safe and connected community working group is because we recognise that hate crime, racism and other issues are rising. And that is part of this work. It's about celebrating our diversity. What makes us different makes us great, rather than divided.
Thank you. Lovely, thank you both. So we're going to now move back to item 7. So for our special educational needs update, they could join up here. Sarah, if they wanted to, they could come.
Two spare seats.
Lovely. Good morning, colleagues. I'm Karen Curry, the new Head of Inclusion in the Council. Oh, right, I'll have to come this way. There we go. Does that sound better? Perfect. Okay. So I have a SEND update for you, so quite a bit of data which I'll contextualise for you. So the number of education healthcare plans, looking at the chart here, based on our SEND2 returns, we can see that at 2025, 2024, the real increase in figures, the rise in numbers during those early years reflects the extension of the eligibility for education and healthcare plans from the SEND reforms. Those lower figures in 2024 were influenced by the delays in assessment works that happened, but we are also seeing that the recovery plan that's happened in Portsmouth identifies that increase because of our timeliness. That's improving. So 16% increase there. New needs assessment requests. Again, the requests for assessments have increased every year except during COVID, of course, when the pandemic caused that temporary dip, but of course there was a surge after that. But a slowdown's been evident in 2024-25 after the rapid growth. And I think we are going to continue to see rises, and we know there are changes ahead with the SEND reforms, but useful for you to see the trends that have happened. New requests from early years. A real steady increase in the proportion of new education, health and care needs assessment requests for our pupils in early years. Absolutely peaked at 40% in 2019-20. Again, we can think about this being linked to the pandemic. From 2022-23, there were 37% requests from early years, and that fell a little bit in 24-25 to 31%. And we do know that there is, of course, a falling birth rate, but that doesn't mean that the numbers of children with SEND needs being identified isn't increasing. So the source of new assessment requests, this is quite interesting to see. So school requests have in fact steadily declined, but parental requests have risen sharply since 2017 to now, with a significant 8% increase in 24-25. Slight reduction in requests compared to previous years in some areas, particularly from our early year settings, who are working particularly hard to support our children with special educational needs. But here again we see parental requests identify a significant increase compared to previous periods. There is a lot of anxiety for our parents around the potential changes in the SEND systems. This might explain the rise. New assessment timeliness. So something that Portsmouth has been working on is the timeliness of education, health and care plans. There's a 20-week process for the completion of a plan from the point of it being received, including the gathering advice, the preparing of the actual plan, the parents' agreements, the consultations. 20 weeks isn't a long time, but that is the time frame. The current cumulative rate when this was prepared in October was 37%, a real improvement on previous data. In November, last count, that was at 40%. So we are moving in the right direction with a target of timeliness of 75% by the end of this academic year. Annual reviews. This is the statutory process for children with an education healthcare plan to have an annual review of their needs involving parents, education settings, professionals, health and care that may be involved with that child or young person. Managing annual reviews has been challenging because of the increase in education healthcare plans that there are now in the council. There are actually 2,600, but I'm sure since the time I came in the room to now there are probably another 3. So this is increasing quite quickly. There were delays in some assessment work, potentially due to staff capacity and stability. We do have some continuing issues with Synergy, our data programme, but we're working with backup plans at the moment using Excel, and we're continuing to see improvements in this. But the timeliness of annual reviews is improving, which is positive, and that's been supported by team changes and improvements and revisions in processes and communications with our schools and settings that are carrying out these plans. This does continue to be a priority area for us. First tier tribunals. There are, as we mentioned, a number of parents with anxieties and concerns around the plans for their child or young person in their family. So we saw appeals to first tier tribunal rising sharply. Numbers increased from 12 appeals in 22-23 to 85 in 2024-25. So far, 21 appeals have been received, but we do know there are another 40 sitting waiting to come. That's a significant pressure on the teams and also on the need for legal support. So the grounds for appeals, in 2024, last academic year, 78% were Section I appeals, and these particularly are around placements, particularly where there's a desire for parents who want their child to be in a specialist setting. And that is the real difficulty, not just here in Portsmouth, but nationally. There just aren't enough places to meet the desired needs. Emerging trends, appeals about refusal to assess. We can see that in 2024 there were 5 around that particular area, and in 2025 there were 8, so small increase there. And that's where a parent has made a request, or perhaps a school. All of the information was looked at by a number of colleagues and professionals with advice, and it was refused. And there's a similar trend in the refusal to issue after having assessed. So in 2024 there were 2 appeals related to that, and in 2025 6 appeals. So tribunal outcomes, just to give an overview. Appeals can take over 12 months to be heard in the legal system, especially where they are non-phase transfer. We're seeing some appeals taking above 12 months. Data shows that no appeals lodged in 2024-25 went in our favour as a council, and there are still many that are outstanding. Appeals that were conceded by the local authority or a consent order, there were 24, and appeals that were found in favour of the parent or the young person numbered 10. So just to give some detail around the tribunal challenges, really. When an appeal is lodged for a specialist placement for a child or young person, most cases meet the minimum entry criteria for a special school or an inclusion centre. But because of capacity, those children or young people cannot be placed. Defending those decisions is particularly challenging for our colleagues, and even more challenging without the appropriate legal support. But it is always acknowledged that we cannot meet that child's needs. In many cases, the local authority has no option but to concede. And what this does then is push the capacity of our special school places beyond what they can manage, and that affects and impacts on the education of the children that are already in place in those settings. Sometimes this will require placement in independent or non-maintained special schools, and that absolutely adds significant financial pressure, because generally those independent places come at extremely high cost for individual children. The sharp rise in appeals has placed a strain on our legal teams. We've therefore missed deadlines, been unable to provide the packs that might be needed, and there have been some capacity issues. So we know that our legal services are trying their best to support us, but with the numbers that are coming through, this is the challenge. And finally, in relation to tribunals, has been the mediations process. So there has been an increase, as you can see from the graph, in the tribunal appeals, and the mediations absolutely surged. Each mediation again pulls on the capacity of the team, because that requires perhaps a scenting leader and advisor, as well as others to join those meetings to be a part of the process. So just looking at the mediation topics, mediation over refusals to assess, over Section I, which has been about those placements, over the refusal to issue an education healthcare plan, or again about the content of the plan, which usually links to the desire for a placement in a specialist setting. So that's the overview of SEN in Portsmouth, colleagues.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask then, so on what grounds would you refuse to assess?
There are very, very few requests that are refused in Portsmouth, very few. But it might be that the professionals looking have deemed that the needs of that child can be met in the mainstream setting without any more than the ordinarily available provision.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? No? Thank you very much. We're just accepting that report, aren't we? There's no action from that one. Thank you very much. So we're moving on to housing update. James.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to invite Sally and Steve to join us. So just as they're coming to the table, Sally and Steve will introduce themselves, but they're here to give a brief overview of the City Council's work to prepare and implement some new legal requirements in how damp and mould cases are investigated and treated in a residential setting. The City Council wears two hats in this regard. It is still a significant landlord managing and owning approximately 17,000 units across Portsmouth, Havant, Fareham, Gosport and Winchester. So partly the update will touch on the landlord's implementation of the new law. And also the City Council within its local authority boundary then has responsibility to engage with the private rented sector and tenants living in other tenure within the city and supporting tenants to seek redress where they've got damp and mould in their properties. Steve and Sally, over to you.
Hi, good morning. So I'm Steve Groves, I'm Head of Building Repairs, and I'm going to specifically talk about the landlord implication and what we've done regarding damp and mould. And then Sally's going to talk about the private sector side and the work that they're doing on that side. So really what this is just a verbal update really on a damp and mould policy that we did in response to our ABS law that recently came into implementation that we reported at the Housing Cabinet in November. So I'll just pick out some of the highlights really out of that. So the background was that our ABS law came into force for the social rented sector from the 27th of October and applies to all social housing landlords. From this point, social landlords will have to address damp and mould hazards that present a significant risk of harm to tenants and deal with those within fixed timescales. The government has drafted guidance for social landlords, which includes information in relation to damp and mould hazards that will be in scope, and also talks about the first phase, but also highlights that there are other phases that are planned to incorporate other health and safety HHSRS risks into our ABS law in future phases. So in 2026 there will be a number of hazards that are brought into our ABS law, such as excess cold, falls, explosions, fire, electrical hazards, and then in 2027 the government will extend the regulations further to all the remaining health and safety hazards that present a significant risk of harm. The Renters' Right Act that recently came in will also extend our ABS law to private sector landlords, but at this stage there are no timescales or details of exactly what that's going to mean, and sort of we're awaiting to see what the impact of that will be. So specifically, some of the main points out of our ABS law that we've incorporated into our damp and mould policy. It talks explicitly around surveyor inspection, so if we are aware of any potential significant hazards, we need to do an inspection within 10 working days and investigate any potential emergency hazards within 24 hours. And a big change in the legislation that we've incorporated is that we do need to start to consider the circumstances or vulnerabilities or any other impacts that may affect the residents as a result of damp and mould. So that is something that it's not just looking at the cause, but it's recognising the resident circumstances and whether there's a particular impact from the damp and mould that's presenting itself. The next bit is once we've done that inspection, we have to provide a written summary to the resident within 3 working days. and then depending on what that investigation highlights, if there's an emergency hazard that has been identified, we would need to take emergency work within 24 hours. And if there's a significant hazard that's been identified, we would need to undertake work within 5 working days. But within our policy, we've opted to say that if there's a significant hazard, we would do it under our urgent repair category, which is actually to do the work within 3 days. So we'd actually be doing it quicker. Landlords are also expected to follow up to confirm the completion for repairs and ensure that they don't reoccur. And within our policy, we've explicitly stated that we will call back residents within 6 months to check that the damp and mould has been resolved and it's not reoccurred. And we're also, it also talks about that landlords are expected to have a proactive approach and routinely inspect properties and identify risks. And from that perspective, we are proactively reviewing our damp and mould cases periodically, seeing what we can learn in terms of is there specific property types that are presenting that we can be more proactive to do work on, or we're also working on trying to use any of our resident data to see if there's any particular demographics that are presenting as issues or not engaging with us. So that's the main thrust of the points of the policy and how we're reacting to that. In terms of implementation, we took the report and updated our damp and mould policy, and it's probably worth pointing out that we did preempt our AWAB's law. We did do an initial damp and mould policy way back in February 2024, so we did know this was coming, and some of the changes within the policy aren't that significant apart from some of the timescales. We had preempted most of the stuff from the guidance that was going around as part of the consultation for AWAB's law. We've updated posters and advice leaflets, and I think we've distributed those to all councillors so that they're all aware of our advice and support. We've in the winter edition of House Talk, we've publicised the damp and mould policy and the processes and what residents need to do to contact us. We've updated staff and got e-learning available for staff that are visiting properties, and we've particularly done briefing and training for our surveyors so that they're fully aware of the difference now that we've got our AWAB's law and the changes to the damp and mould policy, so that they're fully aware of how they need to assess the damp and mould, because it is subtly different, particularly the understanding the impact of the damp and mould that's presenting and the sort of things that they need to sort of question a resident on to understand if that's going to have any sort of impact. We're also done some IT development to we're sort of particularly the providing a written summary to residents within 3 working days. That is quite an extensive ask. So we did update our database so that we've now got a new damp and mould survey form that automatically feeds a letter that would go to the resident, pulling out the relevant information so that they're updated about the summary of the survey, and then we can get those out quite quickly, and that has proved very effective. You know, our performance on getting the letters out has been very good. We've also been talking to housing officers and our contractors and recognising that we do actually visit a lot of our properties anyway, and we're just sort of making sure that everybody that visits a property uses it as an opportunity to be aware. They don't need to diagnose the problem, but it's about being aware when you go into a property and understanding actually if I do see damp and mould, that is something that they're aware of and they can report that. We're also undertaking quite an extensive programme of stock condition surveys between now and September 2026. So we're undertaking in the region of 12,000 stock condition surveys. So we're going into most of our properties, and again that will be proactively looking for a range of hazards, but including damp and mould. So we are expecting to get a lot more of that being highlighted to us. And we have set up a damp and mould panel to have oversight of our performance, and meeting regularly with the residents to feedback what our performance levels are, and any ways that we can sort of improve our performance in our response to damp and mould. And I think, just to give a very quick, so you know the scale of what we're dealing with. So since the legislation came in on the 27th of October, we've identified 9 significant hazards that would be classed as significant under the legislation. And to give a bit of context, since the 27th of October, we've had 474 damp cases that we've had reported to us that we are in the process of investigating. So it's a small number, but we're seeing in terms of significant hazards, but we are dealing with a lot of damp and mould cases. Some of those may be fairly low level, certainly a big majority is condensation, but no doubt we are seeing a lot of cases that we're actually dealing with, and that is obviously a challenge for us to make sure that we've got the right resources to be able to meet those timescales. So if I pass over to Sally, she'll talk about the private sector.
Sure. So, hello everyone. I'm Sally Scaskard. I'm Assistant Director for Housing Management. Excuse my slight husky voice this morning. So, as Steve rightly said, currently Web's law does not apply to the private rented sector. However, the Renters' Rights Bill has made provision for regulations to be drawn to extend it into the private rented sector. And as Steve said, we haven't got timelines for that. We suspect it will be around 2027. It's subject to consultation, so we'll wait to hear. But in the interim, our own Portsmouth City Council private rented sector team are being very proactive in that space around trying to educate landlords around their responsibilities to manage effectively damp and mould, address it really quickly, and to encourage renters to report these issues to their landlords initially, and where they don't get that buy-in from the landlord to get it sorted quickly, to then come through to us in the private sector team, who and will then respond and work with the landlord to try and get it addressed. So initially, what will happen if we do get a report is our officers will go out and complete a full HHSRS inspection of the property to identify if there are any hazards. The problem that we have at the moment is that damp and mould rarely rates in terms of a serious hazard. It has to be really, really bad, way beyond what you would expect it to be, to rate as a Cat 1 hazard. However, that doesn't mean that we would just walk away. So it may rate as a lower hazard, in which case we can take some enforcement action. But usually what we'll do is work with the landlord, highlight the issue, and give them advice on what they need to do to rectify it, and give them a timescale to address that. Only if they don't comply will we then step into that enforcement space officially and actually make them do some things to address that issue. What I would say is that the team are conscious that our private rented sector tenants across the city may not always know where to go if they do come up with issues, that a landlord's not addressing quickly, particularly around damp and mould. So what we are currently doing is engaging in quite a significant comms campaign across the city to promote the service that is out there to support people with managing damp and mould and educating people generally. We've kicked that off several months ago with a training session for landlords. We have a landlords forum, and Steve's team kindly worked with the private sector team to produce some training for landlords around how to identify damp and mould and what you need to do to address it, the different causes of damp and mould. And we're doing similar stuff with residents, and no doubt we'll keep revisiting that as we progress towards any legislation, actually any regulations being brought in. But in terms of the comms that we're doing, we are doing lots of things, ranging from in January we're going to have some bus ads going out across the city. We're also utilising pharmacy bags for advertising the service around damp and mould, because we think, often people who may have illnesses that may make them more susceptible to damper mould, that's probably a good place to hit. We've developed damper mould posters, which are also, you'll start to see those popping up. With a lot of them already up across the city, and we'll be going out more. And we've got revised damper mould leaflets too, which we're trying to distribute as much as we can across the city. We've also developed with the private sector team and with Steve's team, we've developed some online training for professionals, and that's for just visiting professionals. That's on the Portsmouth City L&D website currently for all employees to look at that. It's at a very high level, but what it does is it enables all visiting officers to be able to spot the signs of damper mould, because it's not just the great big black covered walls that we want to know about. You know, it is those early signs. It's much easier to address damper mould if you catch it early, before it causes any harm too. So it takes people through the different types of causes of damper mould, how to spot it, and what the reporting routes are for damper mould. So that's available on the website, and I'll provide the links to the website, because we also, on the Portsmouth City website, there's a lot of guidance on there for residents about how to manage moisture within their homes to reduce the risk of damper mould, but also what the reporting routes are for them if they're struggling with managing that damper mould. So we'll provide the links in the minutes so people have got that. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Councillor?
You're doing a brilliant job as usual. Housing's exceptional in Portsmouth as far as I'm concerned. I have a question. If somebody has damp and mould, this is a little bit of casework, somebody you know, and it's been reported in the past, if they have, for example, fibromyalgia and they're not physically able, is there somebody around who can actually take the dried mould off the wall for them from housing?
The short answer is yes.
Excellent. That's the one I wanted.
If again, that's exactly the sort of scenario of just reporting that through, and again taking into account. I think our ABS law is more specific around making sure that you're taking into account the individual circumstances and health conditions of that resident, and that is always an option that the surveyor. In fact, when the surveyors go out, they very often go out with remover that if it's a small area, they would just remove it without even getting a contractor out there. So yeah, if you just get them to report that through, then we would definitely pick that up.
Thank you. Andy?
Just a thank you really for this. I think sometimes, well, I don't know about the rest of you, sometimes I sit at boards and wonder what impact I'm having on the world. But I think we reflect often that the health and well-being of our residents is a collective effort. I know my NHS colleagues frequently talk about the stuff that they're dealing with, their reaction to conditions and diagnoses and those kind of things. What caused that is not in their control. And I just think understanding, helping all of us understand what we can do about this, how we can help residents, helping all of our staff and all of our colleagues across all of our agencies who'll be seeing people in their own homes, is that health and well-being board thing that we try to do, which is try and prevent things occurring before they happen and getting people the support they need. So I just wanted to thank you and your teams. I think it's a great report. I think the work that we're doing is absolutely essential, but you don't often see the direct result between doing something as preventative and then it not happening further down the road sort of thing. But thank you very much. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, Heather?
Thank you. Again, yeah, reiterating that. It did strike me that, you know, is this an area where we want to do a little bit more around joining up some of our data in terms of a very implementation way? It sounded to me like you're going to have a wealth of data on which residents are particularly impacted by damp and mould. And actually, are we able then to see that? Well, the answer is probably no, but within patients' sort of health records, and, you know, understand those links and be able to have more targeted conversations and impact around respiratory health, etc. It just felt like there was a huge opportunity there to perhaps go one step further with this programme of work.
Yeah, I think like the answer is yes, and I think we're on a we are on a learning curve. So, like I say, we first introduced the policy in February 2024, and that initially some of our analysis of damp and mould because of the cases and having the data was very much around linking it to, was there certain property types, for instance. So we know from that first analysis that our older acquired properties are more prone to damp and mould just because of the age of them. I think we also identified that our concrete ring beam, a particular type of construction, again more prone, and actually it was a particular non-traditional type of property that is more prone to it. So that was the first phase of using that data, because you're right, the more we do it and record it and have processes, we gather data. We had a damp and mould panel meeting this week, funnily enough, where we were actually specifically talking about the housing officer tenancy update visits and the sort of more softer data that they collect about the residents, and so certainly what we're trying to look at is using that data, linking it in with our damp and mould data, so that we get a better understanding and ultimately can be more proactive. I think that's what it's about, is trying to almost as opposed to damp and mould being a reactive service. If we can be more proactive about it and identify where we need to focus some of our efforts. You know, we've got 15,000 properties. It's difficult to visit every single one of them every 5 minutes. But if we can be more proactive about it and use that data, I think you're right. The more we do that, we can work with other agencies as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think the other thing that we really do need to do across all visiting professionals is to raise the profile of the private rented team. And the work that they can do to improve housing conditions for all private rented tenants, because I think often it's that either professionals who may go in and see something but don't actually know what to do with it, and the tenants can often be quite reluctant because they're fearful of losing their tenancy, and our officers are able to have those conversations to provide that reassurance to them and talk them through what the process would look like. So I think there's probably also some more joined up work that we need to do with visiting health professionals around raising the profile of that team.
Helen and then Lorna, and then we will have to move on.
So just quickly, obviously, the ambition for having population health management was to have local government data, including housing data, adult social care, to link in with the NHS data, but we're not there yet. However, I think this is a really great example. We're already doing some pilot work with James's directorate around those with respiratory conditions, being able to. So we are working with PCN's GP practices. It's not rolled out yet, but we've got pilots where patients with respiratory conditions are getting, what are we called? Messages, texts, that's the word, texts. Sorry, I'm not on the AI generation enough yet, but texts, basically identifying and sharing with them the links to some of the other work that the council offers around opportunities around getting their boilers or new boilers fixed, but also just advice around energy. We do so much work as a council around all of the work around poverty, again led in James's directorate, around cost of living support. So I think this is another one, because we're already working across thinking about this as another area we could look at in terms of trying to make that link with particularly primary care, but obviously with community services. And the benefit, sorry, and I will then be quiet, is we've already got, which we're going to be talking about in the next paper, our neighbourhood health model, where we can connect this in, because we are already all signed up working together across the board, health and wellbeing board. So I'll take this one back with James, if that's okay, and speak to you guys.
Thank you. Lorna?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think there's a really good opportunity to connect this with the community help desks that we've got now set up in Paulsgrove and Portsea. It's a good way of getting the information out, but also the offer around that we're developing, which is around the community wellbeing hubs, and there could be more activity about how we raise awareness and connect residents with the offer that you have. So I think we'll have a conversation.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry I have to stop that conversation because lots of useful things there, but it's about connecting the teams, isn't it, and making sure we're doing things once. So thank you. So we're moving on to the role of the health and wellbeing boards in neighbourhood health. Now I've got Andy, Helen, and I know Bernie. So who's leading? It'll be Bernie.
Yeah,
and I will be brief because I'm very conscious of time. Apologies that this paper was late coming out to you. You will note it refers very much to draft guidance. It remains draft guidance, and we don't have definitive policy or guidance on how neighbourhoods could operate. So this is kind of a preemptive description of what we believe could be coming to impact the roles and responsibilities of the Health and Wellbeing Board. And basically it's asking for the continued delegation of the organisation and delivery of that work through the Health and Care Partnership, which is chaired by Helen, and sort of the key delivery of that work through the P3, which is the Portsmouth Partnership, Brider Partnership, I always get the P's in the wrong order, who deal with the operationalisation and how we come together to do that. Neighbourhoods is very exciting. I could talk about it forever. I think I've probably spoken to lots of people about it repeatedly on many occasions. It is a very much partnership approach. We have strong engagement from all of the providers, our Strategic Voluntary Alliance, our community and our primary and our acute health trusts, as well as all of the departments across the council where we are doing that work. We are seen as an exemplar. A paragon is possibly a bit of a strength to paraphrase what Councillor Whittington said, but we are working really hard to show how the Portsmouth way of working is delivering, and basically this is just to try and preempt some guidance that we expect could come between now and the next Health and Wellbeing Board, where we will bring a specific update should we know more concrete terms of what is expected of us and how we're working. But it was to give some airtime and some assurance as to how this falls into our existing governance and our ways of working, and I will stop there.
Thank you. Is everyone happy with that proposal, that we keep it within our existing structures and not create any new? Fantastic, and we'll have a proper update when we get the guidance. Thank you very much. So on to our final paper, which is the Integrated Care Partnership update. Fran, is that you today?
Yes, maybe a bit of joint with Matt as well, but yes. We came last time with an ICP update in September, and I think there's two key things I wanted to raise here today. One is the research assembly, which we held in mid-November, and to highlight some of the findings and what came from that. And then the other is some of the conversations which have come from the Joint Committee, which was at the beginning of November. So I'm going to start with the research assembly. So the Integrated Care Partnership held a research assembly, I think it was the 19th of November. It was our best attended assembly yet. So we had over 200 people attend. It was held in Winchester, and the idea of the event was to bring together all of the research which is going on across Hampshire and Isle of Wight with a particular focus on health and wellbeing, and to encourage shared learning, best practice and join up. So it was an absolutely huge event. We had the Deputy Head of Research from NHS England come down and present, and we asked her, have you ever been to an event like this? She said, I have been to lots of research events, but not one quite like this. So I'm going to take that as a compliment. We had, as part of the event, we had a poster competition, and there were 54 posters submitted. A number of people around the table and a number of organisations around the table were winners. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Healthcare Trust, you won a few, didn't you? And Portsmouth City Council also won a couple, and COOF actually won some. So it was a very well done, Portsmouth. You did very well. What we are just doing now, because actually what's really important is the so what of that event, is there'll be an impact event in January. It's an online webinar, and we'll start to share some of those findings from the posters and some of the updates on some of that research. I think sharing the findings from 54 posters is going to take us quite a long time. So I think this will be a bit of an ongoing journey around how we share some of that. But I think what it really highlighted is that there is some amazing work going on, and not just in what you would traditionally think of as research institutions, but actually we have a really rich research culture in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and it was a really great opportunity for sharing. I took loads of actions away from it, which is really good, because my theory is if I took lots, so did the 200 people, and so that we'll get a real drive around delivery as a result of that event. So there's some really positive feedback from our last assembly. The Joint Committee was also a really positive conversation. As we probably said in September, the conversation was really about what is the future of the Integrated Care Partnership. You may be aware that nationally the 10-year plan reference, it was to be abolished, and what we found locally is actually there's quite a strong appetite to keep the Integrated Care Partnership, potentially in a slightly different format. So the conversation in November really was focusing on what's worked over the last few years and what hasn't, and where's our opportunity to really keep what works and maybe park what doesn't. So the conversation actually spoke a lot about the assemblies and how they were useful forums and people would want to keep them. And also spoke about really the value of the Integrated Care Partnership Joint Committee is about how the health and wellbeing boards across Hampshire and Isle of Wight come together with the ICB and with all our partners at a wider geographical level, and the value in shared learning, sharing best practice and some of that kind of system problem solving. And really it's the way that we can support partnership working in the system, but that some of the delivery programs that we've worked on over the last couple of years haven't potentially been quite so successful. So the value's been in leadership, coming together around health and wellbeing rather than at a Hampshire and Isle of Wight level rather than at a place level, and managing that kind of not managing but making the most of bringing the health and wellbeing boards together in a space. So the action was for me and my team to go away and kind of collate some of those views and to go out and engage a bit more to bring a proposal back to our next joint committee, which is in late January, with some options on how the Integrated Care Partnership might look in the future. We did have quite a lot of conversation about how it might interact with the Mayor, and that may not be quite so relevant or might be a longer term vision, but we'll work through that over the coming weeks.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks. I'll just touch on the assembly first. It was, as I say, incredibly well attended. I had the pleasure of summing it up at the end, and there was a lot to speak. I could have gone on for about an hour or more because there's so much going on. But I mean, the fact that it was so well attended for something that if you'd done this 10 years ago, you wouldn't have had anything like that engagement, because the way we use research now is so permeates about health and social care sector, and well beyond as well. So way into the VCSE as well, and it was just fantastic, and the conversation, just the way we look at things now is so different. And obviously locally we have the so one of the things where it says in the paper we had we had each place did their, so Hampshire, Isle of Wight, Portsmouth and Southampton did, and Portsmouth Southampton did a joint one with their 2 HDRCs, and of course our HDRC is actually the vanguard of our research, and it's of course that permeates through all of the city, not just the city council, but all of our partners, because it's all about getting our community researchers and people coming up from those areas. So it was fabulous, and as Fran said, so much to take out of that. And indeed, I took stuff back for work as well, which is always good stuff. There's the on the Integrated Care Partnership future. We went around. We had quite a lot of conversation. We tried to keep it was sort of structured but flowing, but where we ended up was actually a really positive place. So effectively, where we're looking at where we're thinking of the ICP, it's a shame that it's so. If you haven't read the 10-year plan, it's one line, literally. It is a sentence. We are, as a non sequitur, we're going to abolish integrated care partnerships. That's it. It doesn't really seem to be any particular reason for it. It's just one line. But as Fran said, there has been that thing from the DHSC now saying, actually, if you think it works, keep it going. But it won't have a statutory function because it won't have a statutory basis. So the Integrated Care Strategy, which is owned by the Integrated Care Partnership, will go somewhere else, and we don't know where. We presume the board, but we don't know. But effectively, and obviously this will come to our options paper on the 28th of January, is effectively looking at the Integrated Care Partnership probably as something which is effectively a bringing together of the 4 health wellbeing boards. That it becomes a bottom-up organisation, and there is an opportunity as well because we don't have to do things we have to do at the moment. So you can actually mould it more for what we need it to do rather than what it has to do. So if it becomes a non-statutory organisation, you can actually do things that you think you really need to do at that level, whereas there's some things we currently have to do, we don't have to do anymore. So obviously we'll keep you in touch, but it's just about if you've got any particular thoughts on it, do get in touch with either go direct to myself or to Fran's team, and they can take that back. But obviously we'll keep you up to date with what happens on the 28th of Jan.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Oh, Lorna?
Just very quickly, I wanted to say that I would fully support the ICP continuing because at the moment it's the only space that the VCSE has a voice in the system.
Yeah.
And also just to flag that as a member of the Health and Wellbeing Board, as a place-based representative, I've been asked to join the leadership committee of HIFCA from January, so we're going to have a wider representation from place for the next 6 months on that leadership committee at HIFCA. So I think that's really important development as well.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, and that was a really key thing as well. So there was a lot of conversation from the HIFCA representative on the joint committee, and really about how the VCSE is at the heart of it, and also we did slightly out of scope, but we did. It was very clear that from a lot of the partners in the room was actually the VCSE should probably be on the Integrated Care Board rather than on the Integrated Care Partnership as a key thing. They are on lots of other ICBs around the country, so so that's something that and there's other discussions about membership of the board, but that's not for this place at the moment. But yeah, absolutely, it's a case of just making sure that we get all those voices there and make sure that we have those place-based things, which if it became a confederation of the health wellbeing boards, that would be absolutely permeating through it. So, but watch this space.
Councillor Valley?
Thank you for my first meeting. I've really enjoyed it, really informative. Can I make a plea as somebody who's quite dyslexic? I can't read any of the public health annual report because it wasn't able to be put into Word, I think. Can I just say one more thing? When you have coloured backgrounds and it turns out in black and white to be grey, can't see it.
Just to say that what you got was the final draft. It's going to be published.
Brilliant.
And it will meet all of there are several rules that you have to meet to put it onto the website. So hopefully, but let us know if that isn't the case or it goes on the...
I'm really bad at reading computer screens. That's why I like it in real life.
Hard copy.
Hard copy. Yeah. But thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you everyone. Our next meeting is March 4th, so we'll see you then. Have a good Christmas, everyone.